to go live, and then we are going to roll the intro. So we are live. We have here Ted and a special guest, Justin, and we welcome everybody who's joining in to tune in. Let me know if you guys are receiving well. Obviously, we have to go through the whole checkup on audio and visuals, and I think we are okay, but if you can confirm, that would be great. But for anyone who's listening in on the record portion of the session, this is every Tuesday. We try to have a good conversation, anything about AEC, life, or whatever that we are interested in, and just having a good conversation in the evening with the folks that we are in the profession with. And today, the special guest is Justin, who has his own channel, a much better, much bigger channel than mine. And today we had a topic of extensions in SketchUp, and he's been known as the master. So we decided to just kind of have him on board and have some good conversation with him. So, Justin, why don't you take it away and just kind of introduce yourself to the crowd?
Sure, sounds good. So first off, thanks for having me on. This is fun. I don't get to talk SketchUp in 3D all that often, which is weird. But so talking to people live about it is exciting. So I'm Justin Geis. I have a YouTube channel called the SketchUp Essentials, where I teach people how to use SketchUp. So I've got, I don't know, something like 800 videos on there. So I try to be pretty detailed in the stuff that I talk about, but it's all about SketchUp, all about modeling. So that's kind of my big thing, but super excited to be here.
Awesome. You have several channels, I believe. So you have a website, the SketchUpEssentials.com, but then in terms of the YouTube channel, you have several channels. Can you tell us a little bit about the focuses and what you try to do on different channels?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm super excited about 3D in general. Like I just think it's really fun. So I started off as a general contractor and I started getting models back in SketchUp. I'm an estimator in my day job. So we figure out like how much the buildings are going to cost. And we used to get all these preliminary plans in 2D, and then every now and then we'd get this like SketchUp model that came across, and I was like, well, what's this? And so I downloaded SketchUp and opened it up, and I was like, wow, it's way easier to do a price on a building with a 3D model than just using flat plans. So that's kind of how I got started in 3D. But I have 4 different channels actually.
Wow.
So I have the SketchUp Essentials, which is about SketchUp. I have the Rendering Essentials, where I talk about how to create 3D renderings in different software. So a lot of the focus there is like Lumion, Inkscape, Twinmotion. I really like real-time rendering, but it was something where not everyone coming to the SketchUp channel necessarily wanted to talk about rendering. So I kind of like broke it off into its own thing. And then I also have a channel for Fusion 360 called the Fusion Essentials. And I have a Blender channel called the CG Essentials. So I'm kind of a 3D crazy person, I guess. I don't know.
3D enthusiast.
It's impressive the amount of content that you generate.
Do you sleep?
Yeah.
I sleep. I just get up early.
It is incredibly impressive. And it's funny you mentioned that you started your career as an estimator in the construction industry, because this is not the first time we've heard this. I've heard this from you. I've heard this from many artists and many SketchUp artists specifically. Oh yeah, I used to be in construction. I would get these great models every once in a while, and it was so much easier. So I went down the path of 3D modeler and model developer. And it's really interesting to hear that come up as often as we hear it.
Well, it's just So imagine, because like when you're an estimator, right? But like a lot of the time what you'll get is you'll help price the project through the different iterations, right? Schematic design, concept design, and then you get more information as you go. But when you first price out a project at schematic design, you might get like 6, 10 sheets, showing some elevations. Well, if your building's not a perfect square and you're trying to figure out how much metal panel there is on a building, how much glass there is, and it doesn't show up on the elevation, it's really hard to pick it up. But if you've got a 3D model, you can just fly around it. Like I've actually printed off pictures of 3D models, and like as I quantify things to put in an estimate, I'll like mark them off on the printout just to make sure that I've picked everything up, because otherwise, like before you had that, it was just so much visualization and it was super difficult to be accurate. So
yeah, and I imagine, that's one thing that I find interesting. I interact a lot with kind of the layperson, the person who doesn't use models, either a private owner or a developer who maybe isn't as versed in the architectural side of things. And when they pick up the plans, they don't see it. They don't understand it at all.
Yeah.
I can't imagine trying to understand a building and figure out construction costs from that. If you're working as an estimator and just seeing the flats, that must be difficult. I never really thought about how much value was in a model from that point of view.
Well, and we see that all the time with especially owners, people that aren't looking at those drawings, like you said, because like when you look at plans all day, like you kind of build a picture in your head a little bit, like you kind of understand how things come together. But for people that don't look at plans, to give them a flat set of plans and ask them to visualize what it's actually going to look like, they can't do it because they don't do it every day.
Yeah.
Like,
it's not their fault. You shouldn't expect them to.
Right. There's so much value in a 3D model, like a ridiculous amount in a 3D model.
This is how I feel when I talk to like my my accountant. I'm like, these numbers make no sense to me. Thank you for explaining it.
Well, yeah, that's where visualization comes in, and just the 3D model in general. And I think that's where SketchUp really excels in. And you mentioned Fusion 360 as well, so I'm going to get into that a little bit. But are you still practicing general contractor work?
Yep. Yeah, wow. I have a full-time day job as an estimator at a general contractor. So
I don't know where he finds this time. It's purely impressive.
I get up at 4:30 every morning, and I work for 2 or 3 hours a day on the YouTube stuff. So I can't do it at night. I'm too worn out. So
well, here you are again at night, just having a good talk.
You know what? This is different though. This isn't work. This is fun.
Well, I would agree with you on that. Yeah, this is. I really appreciate Joseph inviting me on for this, and I'm always down for a chat. So
yeah, we get such an interesting personalities like Ted or Justin or Matt, hopefully more, and just having good talks. And my very purpose of the channel was to just kind of network and having the community or speak to other professionals, get opinions, because not just me sharing, because obviously I don't know the best. So my goal was to just have good conversation and communication. So hopefully this becomes a way to reach out further. And Justin, we never really like sat down and had a conversation, and publicly we are doing that right now. But it's great that we are able to just kind of chat over and talk about things that we like and we are interested in. Fusion 360, I actually invested some of my time in that because I was part of a company who does a lot of production design. Is that why you just kind of ventured in that area? Can you explain that a little bit?
So, like for me, like one of the things I feel like I need to be able to do to keep putting out good content on any of my channels is to grow from a development standpoint, from a knowledge standpoint. And part of that sometimes is stepping outside of what you're comfortable with. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to expand out and start trying other programs in addition to SketchUp. Not that there's anything wrong with SketchUp. But I wanted to, so I had a little list of programs that I wanted to hit. So I had Blender, I had Fusion 360. At the time, honestly, I did Fusion 360 because I was a little intimidated by Blender and, you know, the giant community and all of that. And like, I'm not one of those guys that's going to pick a program and be like, I love this one and only this one and the other ones are terrible, because I don't think that's fair or true. Like I look at 3D modeling programs like tools in a toolbox, right? Like, for example, like I always get the question, you know, well, do you think SketchUp or Blender is better? I'm like, well, I think SketchUp and Blender they're different. Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, like if I want to create a complex, like super complex moving animation, or if I want to animate fluids or something like that, or simulate it, I'm going to use Blender, you know. But if I want to use something more for architectural type stuff, SketchUp, I think, is a lot better fit for right now. Fusion 360 is phenomenal for like manufacturing type stuff. So if you like 3D print stuff, if you're like mocking stuff up to build metal, CNC, all of that stuff, it's a great program for that. Like I really enjoyed working with it.
Yeah. I often say this, you know, software is just another tool. None is better than the other. There's no perfect tool. There's not one size fits all tool. So, you know, you pick it up and learn how that tool works, as you said, and then pick it up whenever it is right time for the right task. And that's sort of what I usually say whenever I get questions like, is Revit better than SketchUp kind of thing? And I actually spoke about this specific topic before on this stream before. So if anyone's listening again, we're pretty much on same page, apparently. And also, I have a funny analogy for Blender crowd. I kind of compare it to like Jeep people. I always compare software and hardware on like automotives, and you know they're just hardcore. When they see each other, they just kind of wave and say hi, and for other cars, it's just like no, we love these.
The pride level that I see in the software that people are using is easily the strongest with the Blender crowd. Like they love Blender.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because we in my office we do a little bit of ArcViz. Well, we do a lot of bit of ArcViz, but we also do a little bit of VFX product rendering stuff. We just took on a new job that's going to be all product rendering. And it's really exciting because we don't do as much of it or to this degree. So it's like stepping out of that comfort zone. We're like, okay, this is new, this is different. We got to step up to it. And my technical lead, Austin, my business partner, I'm like, I mentioned to him, you know, what I can help with a lot of this as long as we do it in Blender. And he's like, nope, not going to do it, because he's a Max guy. And it's just one of those things where like when you have your workflows and you know they work and you know they're production ready, man, you don't touch that. You don't change that. So I totally get that side of it. But man, there are guys who are only going to use one thing. I used to be that guy. I used to be like the SketchUp guy. All through college, I was the SketchUp guy. I was the plugin guy. I knew as much as I could about the product. And then I learned about Revit, and I started learning all about Revit. And you know, I never became the Revit guy because it wasn't as much fun as SketchUp. But I learned early on that I was like, oh, wait a second, there are other tools in that toolbox that we need to pick up and use depending on, you know, project parameters. You know, you're not going to build, everything you want to build inside of SketchUp. It just isn't practical.
So an example I use a lot is, like in my day job, we'll build bigger projects like hospitals or things like that. So in a big hospital project, you could have just 800 doors in the project. You're going to have to manage all the information associated with all of that. You're not going to manage that in a SketchUp model, and that's okay.
Or CAD,
you know,
for
like
that matter.
like at the same time, if you're doing a smaller project, you have so much more flexibility working in SketchUp than you do in Revit. So it's not that Revit is bad or SketchUp is bad. It's okay, what do I need to do on this project to make it successful? And what's the right tool for that?
Yeah, and that's one of the things with like I'm a big user of Enscape now. I used to be a V-Ray guy. Now I'm an Enscape guy, and just the level of speed that's involved there is great. But one of the things that I think a lot of architects miss with some of these tools and plugins now that they are cross-platform, it's like, well, why doesn't my Revit model look the same or better? Why doesn't it look as good as the SketchUp model? And you can get to that point, but there are limitations inside of Revit because of how Revit works, and it's very organized, which is great, but that also creates a lot of rigidity. Unless you are a families pro, it's very difficult to get those really, really intricate details. I mean, I don't think you're going to be filleting corners too often on your, countertops in Revit.
Right.
It's just too difficult. It's too much extra information that you just don't want to deal with. So, but yeah, it's all about tools in your toolbox. And I'll tell you. Oh, go ahead.
So real quick, but remind me to go back. So for me, I find when I switch over, right, when I use Blender, when I use Fusion 360, I learn skills and things that people are doing with those programs, then I bring back to SketchUp, So like I'll learn how to do something or learn the way that people are doing something. I'm like, oh, I can apply that over here. So it's not like you're losing the knowledge if you go somewhere else and then come back and you're wasting your time. You're just learning different ways to do things.
Exactly.
And different, more efficient way of doing things. You can always do it in one software. It just takes much longer and
right. How long do you want to spend?
That's usually you can make a hole with a screwdriver. It just takes a long time and force.
Right.
Yep. Well, we are really well ventured in some other topics too, and I'm sure we'll derail, and I welcome any sort of off topics too, but I have there's some folks here just waiting for topic of extensions in SketchUp, so we'll get into that. What are your I haven't actually asked this question right off the bat, so I'm sure Justin may or may not be surprised, but what are your top picks? Let's say 5 picks.
I feel like that's a loaded question.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll go somewhere with this, but top 5 SketchUp extensions of your pick. Just not necessarily in order, but perhaps the 5 that just pops in your head. Just quick with the names, and then we'll get into the details.
So this is a little tricky because, again, we were just talking about tools in a toolbox, right? So
loaded question.
Depends on what you're trying to do. So extensions that I really like. So there's a tool from TomTom called Selection Toys. I think everyone should have Selection Toys
ding, ding, ding,
loaded.
ding.
That should always be in. So I am a big fan of Placemaker. Because Placemaker is the extension where you can basically click and bring in data and create a city with a single click. It uses like map data. And I'm a fan of that because of the amount of time it could save you when trying to create context, other things like that. So I'm going to throw a few together here. I'm going to kind of combine them. But the combination of like Curveloft, Joint Push-Pull, and Fredo Scale.
So all Fredo tools, basically.
Yeah, Fredo stuff, but putting them together, when you figure out the way those work together, you can do some crazy stuff. So what does that put me? That puts me at 3. God, there's so many great ones.
I'm sure really you can think of more, but I'm just thinking of like something, or I guess things that just pop in your head the first. Obviously, TomTom makes a lot more tools than just a selection toy if you just think of it that way. Placemaker, I just want to reiterate, it is from Mindsight Studio. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah, and there was like not Placemaker. There was another very similar name thing. Anyways, and then Fredo 6, Curvy Loft. Fredo 6 obviously makes a lot more tools than just a few things that Justin mentioned. And, we have to appreciate, and I was actually talking to another person who's heavily invested in SketchUp, and hopefully that person may be listening to the stream as well. But I really appreciate the amount of people in the community behind SketchUp Extension, and the exception of Placemaker. All of these tools are available for you for free, and anyone who wants to download, you can just download. And these people actually develop this continually on version to version to make it even better and making sure that things actually work. So there's huge amount of time and development resources that's been invested in this, and I really gotta appreciate the people who's giving you free tools basically. And you can always try and fail and do a bunch of different things with it, and that makes SketchUp that much better. And I feel like that's pretty much what people are going in SketchUp with, because there are similar tools to SketchUp when it comes to actual just modeling portion, but really is all backboned on the community of the extensions, because that's what really makes SketchUp.
I think those extensions are, like you said, what makes it SketchUp. I think there's a pretty heavy reliance on those. That's a whole nother topic for a whole nother night. But
oh, come on, that's a fun one. What are you doing to me?
Well, we had a chat, Indie 3D. Yeah, he mentioned Vertex Tool and Sub-D. Yeah.
Those are great.
Those are great. I haven't tried as much. I spoken to Tom about this, and I wanted to invest a bit more time in. Obviously, I haven't got around. Do you use it extensively in your day-to-day tasks, Justin?
For me, oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, Ted, you go ahead. So this is a tough question for me because I don't have day-to-day tasks. Like I have the benefit and also the downside of I don't have a SketchUp deliverable generally, right? Like because I don't work for a design firm, I work for a contractor. So I'm not the one usually doing the models there. So my output is YouTube videos. So it's kind of hard for me to talk workflow and day-to-day because I'm jumping between what's interesting to me at the time. So which is fun, but it can be kind of a downside too.
Yeah, I can see. And I work with this stuff all the time. So it becomes less fun for me. It's like, okay, I got to do this again. So the one that I use all the time is Vertex tools. If I didn't have Vertex tools, I don't think I could get a lot of my job done. Just because we deal with a lot of topographical information, which brings me to my next point. My tools would be Vertex tools, Topo Shaper, soap skin bubble or soap skin and bubble tools.
It's a funny name.
Round corners and JHS power bar.
Yep.
Those five, I mean, with the last exception of selection tools, those five are like my go-to on a day-to-day, because periodically we'll be getting in CAD data with topography information. So we'll clean that up, run it through Topo Shaper to get a really clean mesh, like nice clean mesh. But inevitably we'll have a slab that we have to make fit on that mesh. So then we're messing with the Vertex tools, flattening areas, extruding up, and just trying to find that fit between the topography. And then what we'll end up doing 9 times out of 10 is cutting that all up, throwing it away after we know where we're going with it, and doing it all in soap, skin, and bubble, just because it gives us a little bit more control over the amount of detail in any given area. So yeah, those are my top 5 picks. And thank you, Indy3D, for mentioning Vertex tools. I wish I had more reasons to use Sub D, though.
Me too.
That's one that I don't use very often.
Yeah, it's a very specific kind of modeling, subdivision modeling, and like
if I'm going to do that, I'm going to do it in Blender.
I would agree with that. Honestly, it's a better tool for doing that kind of modeling.
What are you using over there, Joseph?
Yeah, what did you cut that with? Was that Zorro?
No, it's not. It's S4U slice tool.
Oh, yeah. These guys are doing cool stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's such a little niche case scenario, but once you get used to it, it's actually something that lives in my toolbox all the time and I use all the time. And it usually impresses people the amount of simple sort of function that you can do with.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily cutting sections per se. In this case, I just kind of showed it that way, but also something that I find myself using it a lot when you're just modeling in general.
That's a great little tool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem, right? Is there's like a million different tools.
So here's something that I used to do. So right now I jump between machines so many times during the week. I have home machine, I have a laptop, I have a office machine.
How do you deal with keeping them all up to date with the stuff that you want to use?
So that's a problem. One of the problem that I have, you just don't deal with it. And also I have several machines that I'm like reviewing at the moment, and every time I start up a SketchUp, now I don't have a tool that I can review the performance with. So that's a problem. One thing I do is I used to do on Sketchucation, you can re-download the things that you have downloaded before. So
that helps.
Yeah, that helps. But also I used to have a nice layout, you know, maximizing your viewport so all of your toolbars nicely in order. And now I go back every machine or every version every year. Now I have to upgrade all 4 machines that I have access to, and it's a nightmare. So I just learned not to put any tool up there. is pretty much how I roll. But I used to have about 3 rows of tools on the top. So the top 2 are like the ones that I use a lot, and then the bottom row actually used to be the ones that I want to use. So like the ones that I think it's gonna be cool if I implement that into my workflow. Then I just kind of dock it there so that I'm always looking at it in some way, and then people just I guess I just look at it more often and then try to figure out what it does exactly. But now I just kind of got into this method of not really docking anything at all. Well, actually I wanted to show this to some people who may not know. So on Extension Store on Sketchucation, this alone is an extension, so another extension perhaps. But when you go to the bundles, I think, bundles is where it lists all the machines that you have downloaded SketchUp extensions from.
Interesting.
I don't know why it refreshes like that. Yeah, and then here, if you expand it, then it'll list all of this. And with one click, you can install all of that on your machine.
Oh, that's nice.
Nice.
But there are 2 caveats. One, it won't load it as a tool in place. So obviously, you're going to have to reposition. And also, when you download it, you know how it confirms with you whether you want to install that or not for every single install. No. So if I'm doing, here on this one it's 36, but if I go back to like, I don't know, 17 days, I used to have a lot more on the list. Then it's going to be 48 clicks. And it's not like click, 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 click. It's like click, click. And I have to sit there and just wait, and it kind of defeats a purpose.
So I have my workaround for this. Which is I have a file that I have resource collected over the course of many, many years. in the SketchUp users or C drive users, SketchUp, yada, 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 way down deep, finding the plugins folder for everything that I need, copying it into a folder, and it's zipped on my server drive. Every time I start up a new instance of SketchUp, I load that up. The problem is there's so much legacy now. I have to every year or so cull that out. And with the newer apps like Enscape and V-Ray and Lumion, there are links to other files that become important. And it's becoming really difficult for me to be able to quickly set up a machine. I've got it down to a science. Yeah, this is exactly it. Grabbing all these plugins, zipping it up, and then being able to drop it in and start up a new instance of SketchUp. It's become easier, but it's not easy.
Usually it's not as big in terms of file size. So I just store it on my Dropbox or OneDrive or the cloud so that when I log into those accounts from different machines, it is all sort of cohesive environment. That's one thing. Also, SketchUcation extension, if I can ever find it here, it does give you open plugins folder. So actually, that's my quickest way to grab it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so if you go there, then it leads you right to your system location. You don't have to dig through app data roaming. It's a bit easier to locate that once you get that store app going. And I basically copy this and store it somewhere. So whenever I go on to a new machine, then I paste this. And again,
my instance tonight, I totally borked my SketchUp plugins somehow.
Right.
I don't know how. So I have to do this where I delete everything and start fresh. So that's really handy to have that.
Right. And another caveat to the profile that gets saved with the extension store is that you can only re-download the ones that exist inside of this store. If it is a one only existing on extension store, extension warehouse, or one of those other ones that are handled by different format or platform, then you can't really reload using that feature. Again, like the paid extensions and such. So I'm just gonna mention a few that are in the chat. What Tony said, cloth work. That's something that I also really like. Not that I use very often, but I like it. What else?
Something handy for making custom flags.
Yes, and
custom flags and drapes.
Right, and Justin, you did like a string or something like that using clothwork. Is that right? Electrical wire, and then just hang it off the. So you can do string work in like, I don't know. I guess you can make noodles out of it.
Hey, I saw that post on like SketchUcation or something.
Making a spaghetti noodle on a bowl.
Right. So if you're modeling a bowl of noodles, you have the tool now.
So I was just flashing my extension list just so that, it may kind of give you what I'm usually with. Have you used put to memory, retrieve from memory from AnyRoth? Is that
all the time?
Right. As a rendering key thing, I guess we're just like sharing our things that we do. But
what does that one do?
So if you save a scene like this, and then when you like copy and paste in place to different model, it remembers that camera location, and you can just paste the camera location to the other. So the scene just snaps onto this specific orientation. So you can like match the scene on two different model.
This has saved my butt so many times in corrupted models, or somebody else gets into a model and accidentally deletes the primary scene approved by a client.
There's no way to undo scene changes. That's a headache. Because there's no way to undo scene changes. And that becomes like a key way to, if you at least have a backup of file, then you can retrieve it from there. Either that or like a model with different options that you can set it up that specific scene
The only other way that I've ever been able to match a scene has been just such a nightmare. We lost the scene like this. We couldn't retrieve it because we didn't have a backup file. And we had to use the old rendering that we had, the draft rendering, as a watermark, align the view and match it as a watermark. It was brutal. It took forever. Horrible. We managed to get it, and we matched it close enough that we could just like fuzz the edges in Photoshop, but it worked out.
Does any of you use Goldilocks texture and geometry? I know there's some old extension that I have listed here that people may or may not use. Goldilocks texture and geometry. So for here, some other 3D modelers have this. So when I run this, it basically tells me which texture or image map is occupying the most dense space. So this is by calculation. So meaning if I have like AK texture material that's applied to a little tiny newspaper that's in the scene, then it's going to flag me as a first one. Then I can now go to the material things and then see which one is using that. And then just basically knock that out or drop the resolution. There was a native SketchUp tool.
Material replacer.
Yeah, material replacer, and also
that one's nice.
SketchUp team developed one tool. I forget it. I do have it, but out of this, I forget the name of it. But if anyone can think of it, just put it down in the chat. But SketchUp team themselves developed something that that is able to drop the resolution of the texture. It doesn't do sort of the surveying as the Goldilocks does, but it drops resolution to set amount of texture size.
What was it? I swear I talked about that. I thought that was material replacer.
Material replacer replaced something.
I think it's just material resizer.
Oh, material resizer. That must be it.
Yeah.
Then.
So I use that all the time. So with Enscape, if we're using really high quality textures and we need to kind of adjust the scene for this one. We're using 4 and 8K textures on a regular basis just to get the most detail as possible.
Right.
And Enscape already downsizes the bitmaps when it puts it to memory as in the render. But if you're trying to save time showing a client things and you don't need all those big textures, half the time you really don't. If you're doing a presentation type walkthrough, man, I drop the resolution on all those textures as low as I can go without losing detail. I usually go like HD 1080p resolution, but yeah, this has been kind of a lifesaver when models get a little bit too out of control.
Well, to this one, 8K on like a geography map, it makes absolute sense. But 8K on, again, like a tiny little newspaper that occupies the scene, it doesn't make sense. And that's why that's why you can't just go by resolution here. And that's why I feel like this Goldilocks extension is useful in regards to figuring out which one is actually occupying the smallest space. And it's like pixel to pixel ratio that it compares with. And for the same thing, it does the geometry portion. So like I've ran this and it runs so quick. So like there's a one component that in comparison, the density of the geometry on component 8 or component 8 group is a lot more. It's probably the tree. And it's a lot more than any other geometry that's in the scene. So like when you're kind of doing what I call janitorial work on your model, then sometimes it's a piece of reading glasses that's in the scene, and that thing has like these complex shaped hinges and the screws on the
and you're
glasses.
Never gonna see it.
You're never gonna see it. So at what, like, that's gonna spot it for you, and then
interesting.
You can just
I'm gonna have to give this a try. This'll come in handy for what we do.
Right, for rendering and slimming down your model purposes. Like I've seen this one come in handy.
And then if you build on top of this with like a transmuter or a skimp, something that reduces your something that reduces your polygons, then you can fix that pretty easy. For that
Absolutely.
context stuff.
Yeah, so like if you spot a model like this where one component is occupying that much of more density, then you can just run a skim to reduce that down. That's definitely something I've done before.
Yep.
For all of you listening in, I would appreciate if you just state some of your favorite extensions so that we can just continue conversation on Tony and I can't say this name. Dijon 10 mentioned a couple of extensions. So SketchUp UV through paint is I think you don't write it that way. Through paint is a funny one. I always struggled on how to say that. Through paint from Fredo 6. And then texture positioning. So I guess that's all regarding
I really
the
need
UV.
through paint more often. That's one that comes in handy, and I've used it only a handful of times, and I know it's valuable, but I haven't really learned how to use it properly. So I feel like there's a lot of opportunity to get the hang of that one and actually put it to use.
Now, the more complex your surface and the higher resolution your texture, the longer it takes. So it will kind of sit there and think while it's trying to move your textures around, but it's a great tool for getting stuff to sit on those crazy surfaces, right?
Yeah. How did the other one that I would say has been really useful for us is Sketch UV. That's the other one that we use all the time. Just because it's the only one that offers, and I'm sure this does it as well. I've just never really learned it, but box map, cube map, or box map, cylinder, sphere, and some different mapping, UV mapping functionality that I don't think I've really ever seen in other applications in SketchUp or other plugins in SketchUp. This is nice though.
Have you used the path select tool that comes with that?
Oh, that's where the comes with it. That's so handy. I was looking for that the other day. Is it Sketch UV and the path selector tool? Okay.
So it's in Profile Builder, but it's also in Sketch UV. So if you have Profile Builder, you can use it there. But it is fantastic for doing those quick selections along like complex geometry instead of doing a click, click. It'll find the path between your different points. It's so fast.
Where is the path? Oh, this one?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so
I'm gonna make a cylinder.
Yeah, there you go.
And then how do I do this? Actually, let me explode the curve. That way I can just have one path.
Yeah.
Or I guess that path. And then this one, smart path.
Yep, so pick a point and then
okay. This is exactly the same as Sketch UV, and I was looking for this tool and I had it all along. Goodness.
Yep. So I also use quad
shaper,
quad face tools.
Quad face tools. Thank you.
Yeah.
TomTom's quad face tools has a similar functionality, except it also allows for selecting arrays of.
Oh, Ted froze. Quad face for selecting different things. Yes, and also if you develop a surface, I'm gonna put him out of misery. How do I remove? Okay. He didn't abuse the call, at least. Let's see. So sandbox, and then this is good. I had it all along.
Yeah.
Yeah, so demonstrating how it selects. Another tool that I use selecting edges is TomTom's Select Curve tool, Justin. So whenever you have like complex shapes overlapping, obviously didn't draw that right. So if I'm trying to select this and let's say it is all exploded, explode. Just join in again, Ted. Internet just went down here. That's what he's texting me.
Oh.
So yeah, if this is exploded, you know
Mm-hmm.
how when you select this, it selects only segment.
Uh-huh. Yep.
And TomTom's select curve tool. It's a one select curve. Yeah, it's a one button tool, which I always struggle to find where the hell that
Right. Where does it go?
where'd it go?
Mm-hmm.
I can't see. Basically select curve. I can't see it on my screen. I've got too many screens at the moment.
Usually his stuff goes in the tools or the draw menu, I think.
Yeah. Anyways, but
Mm,
I've assigned a shortcut to it actually. I assigned V for
yeah.
select curve.
Yep.
I'm gonna attempt it once more. I found it. Okay, it was in my chat, between the chat. So it looks like this just tiny little button, and basically you hit that once or activate the tool by, and then you just do that, and then it selects
Ooh.
everything. It doesn't
Okay.
work on this grid or a
Yeah.
mixture of mesh and edges, but it works fine. So I used to just use this tool to get a curve that's continuous and then
Hmm.
hit W, which is my shortcut for welding.
For weld.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but now that they actually have it as a native tool, now you can just run that, and that's all good.
Yeah. Oh, another great TomTom extension is selection memory. So that one will store your previous 5 selections, so you can cycle back through them. So if you accidentally click off of something, you can get it back.
Right. In conjunction with selection toy, I would think that would become very, very useful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really good.
Another selection method is S4U Select. This is one
Okay.
of free of his, and you can set it to length or certain type of coplanar surfaces, but also like what is it, the area or volume of component. So if somebody had made a mistake of making different oriented surfaces and not make it as a component, welcome back, Ted.
Hey, Ted's
Uh,
back.
Hey,
yeah, if you
sorry about
had
that, guys.
made mistake
You're good.
of making things more unique and not made it into a component, this is a way to select all the edges. So for example, if I go in here and then select one of the edges, and then there's way to select same length, and then it'll select all the same length edges.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
That's cool.
that's kind of cool in regards to, being if something's made parametric or a lot of components or faces are being repeated and they're not components. This is a good way to select it. So you see how it only selected the edges that are specific length
Hmm.
and also faces of that size, and you can also do it to parallel faces. So this is, I guess, a little different function to selection toys from TomTom, but this is something that I do load it up every now and then. I just now, load up as I need it and then use it and then
Oh
store
man.
back. That's the life I have been living. But the ones that I use a lot that happens to just live up here, obviously the two Fredo boxes. That's what I call
The Fredo
Curry's.
boxes, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just because it has so many, I just load them up here and then it just lives there. Because I use Profile Builder and Skimp so often in my workflow, along with Enscape, I just put them here. Sub D is something that I do want to use more, but I just haven't found a way to implement because I haven't done that many organic modeling.
Right.
So it's something that I do want. It's so cool and it just works so well. It's so intuitive, yet I don't know. I haven't been able
It's
to do
one of
that
those
many.
It's
tools where
intuitive if you've modeled everything with quads and set it up right.
honestly though, I use it for pillows. It gets such a sad use because I'm like, oh, that rock looks too faceted. I'll just soften it up. Or,
I think that's what I
I need
exactly
that pillow
did
to
to
feel
this
a little
rock.
bit lumpy, less lumpy or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. That and Artisan. Artisan comes in handy a lot too for that
Ooh.
sort of thing.
Yep, absolutely. So the Dejon had mentioned 1001-bit Pro. So this has not updated for very, very long time
Yeah.
to my
Yeah.
knowledge. Oh, so I used to use it a lot, but since it kind of broke on a couple of functions, only function that I really, really like, and I used to use it a lot, and only reason why I continue to install on my machine was the escalator maker. So there are a few tools that makes escalator and also like stairs and railings and such. But I used to be part of like a retail and shopping mall design, and it was
Oh, so you
quite
needed that all the
like
time.
I needed to make the escalator somehow all the time, and that was really useful. And it's very clunky in a way that it makes an escalator, but that was the only way I can make it on the fly. So that's something I used a lot for 1001 Pro. My call ends in 5 minutes. Okay, good.
Did they start limiting them?
I didn't know that, Google. Why did you start doing that?
That's rude.
Um,
I
uh,
need to look into new new option.
how do I what? Extend call. How do I extend call? Now try for free. Okay, now I'm just doing Google advertisement at this point.
Yeah, free trial. Do it.
Well, if
No.
this hangs up, I'm just gonna set up another one and send you invites.
Okay.
That
Good.
works. Yeah, and here profile builder. Yes, it's already up there. I use that all the time.
Yeah.
It's like what I call follow me on crack kind of thing.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
fair.
and
So,
and
so one
Enscape is also extension for that matter.
so one great feature of Profile Builder, because we just did some like 3D mock-ups in SketchUp for my job. And so I actually got to use SketchUp at my job, which was weird, but for like modeling. But one cool thing about Profile Builder is it lets you create flat profiles, which is really great for if you're modeling out like flashing or something like that inside
Oh, good
a
point.
construction model. Because otherwise, you're trying to do it with follow me and you've got to give it like thickness, right? And trying to get it to follow the path, and it's just not great. Well, when you're putting flashing in or like weather barrier, you just need something flat that goes around a curve. Well, you can set up a flat profile and then use the path function to extrude it along a curve. So you can make something flat like that with Profile Builder, which is a great feature.
Yeah, and I remember John Brock's his program Estimator.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever use that, Justin?
A little bit, not a ton.
Little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's got some pretty impressive functionality to it as well. Because I remember he used to like tell everybody about Profile Builder, and there were some things that he wanted it to do that it just didn't want, that it didn't do, and he finally went out and built his own piece of software for it. So it worked out great. But yeah, there's a lot of really cool stuff. Profile Builder is another one that I know there's a lot of value in it, but I just don't use it regularly enough to make it worth spending, I don't know, what is it now, $50, $100 a year? It's not free. I know that much.
Yeah, it's a little bit costly, but I actually have a sort of artist that I work with, I consult with, and she makes pattern making, and Profile Builder happens to be a tool to make patterns along a path and place components along it in a way that it is very interesting. So like it's like an architectural installation kind of thing. So that's something that I find really useful, and also I recommend her to use it. And I actually featured it on my channel about that specific usage, how I go about developing cool patterns and such. I sent an invite for 10 o'clock. So if this ends, then you guys could join there. So I'm gonna, I don't know, just keep going, or should we move on to something else? This is just leading.
Dude, can I make my pitch for extensions, please?
Please, yes, okay. Absolutely.
Hold on. We've got 2 minutes left on this, and you want to switch over to the other one so you're not interrupted midway through?
You can sense a soapbox coming. Is that?
Well,
I'm waiting for the invite to come across, but that might be a good idea.
Right. Did invite not go through? Or did
Oh, I wonder if it's because we're on this call. Hold on.
Oh, maybe it's just muted.
I'll be a guinea pig. I'm gonna leave this call and join the other one, Joseph.
Well, you know what? I'll do
Well,
it.
maybe. Okay. We'll see how this goes. Justin, you're gonna have the audience
I'll
all to
just hang
yourself.
out here.
Well, if I leave, nobody's seeing you. All right, let's roll. I'm gonna roll actually. All right, joining to the next one. Join now.
Can you like send me another invite to that? Because I'm not seeing it.
You're not seeing it. I sent it to.
I'm up.
Make sure you didn't go in my spam filter. Sorry, I'm looking around my microphone. It's in the way.
It says you are invited, unless I went into. Sorry, we lost Justin.
Are we streaming still?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
So
bear with us, guys. We're gonna get him back.
Yes, let's revive him somehow. After Justin. Am I gonna flash like all weird things?
Well, next time, maybe I'll start up the meeting and make you the presenter. Because Google should kick me off. I pay for it, so.
Cool. All right. Well, hopefully he's able to join. And let me just go through a couple of chats. You work on that. And we got profile builder, toggle unit. I have no idea what that is. Simon. Using SketchUp and V-Ray for many years. Rarely use extension, bit crazy. Quad face, OBJ exporter. Do you use OBJ exporter?
Not really. I rarely ever go out of SketchUp to anything, and if I do, I usually just use SketchUp or Collada. Outside of that, yeah, I'm not really sure. I use it all that often. I use one of the ones that I use on a regular basis that is really functional and really helpful. I mentioned it in my webinar is, why am I blanking on this? It's SimLabs SketchUp exporter for 3ds Max, because I periodically get, there he is.
There he is.
All right.
All right. Sorry,
Minor details.
I had to manually type in the address from the text message that I got into my computer.
Ancient technology here. We were talking about OBJ exporter. Ted was saying.
Not really what I use.
Yeah.
I rarely ever export OBJs. Usually it's a texture issue thing.
I actually use OBJ exporter for, what was it? Custom assets for.
Well, hold on a second.
Enscape.
Before we go on to talking about OBJ exporter, I think Justin's got his soapbox out. We're ready for you.
My speech? All right.
Go ahead.
All right. So everyone knows I'm a big extension fan, right? I talk about it on the channel all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I do not understand the hesitancy of people to use extensions. Like you have tools that can make SketchUp better. They can make things a lot faster. They can make your life a lot easier. And I get a lot of pushback from people on, well, I think I need to learn how to do it with native tools first.
I'm a SketchUp purist.
I'm like, do you need to learn how to dig a ditch for utilities with a shovel before you use a backhoe? Like, No, you use the backhoe because it's the right tool for the job. So like, I just want to put it out there again. If there is an extension that's going to make your life easier, do not spend 8 times the amount of time trying to do it with native tools for some reason. Like, there's not a good reason to not use extensions, but it's an attitude I run into a lot. And I always like to say your life will be a lot easier if you use them. So please use them.
Yes.
It's
So,
like I guess the SketchUp purist point of view, it is good to learn the native tools. Obviously, there are gonna be your best
sure.
bet in terms of tools, but there's power tools out there. You don't need to use Phillips head all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. I mean, I get it when it's a challenge. It's like, I'm going to challenge
You're gonna
myself to
chisel
do this
away.
with only native tools, but that's different.
Okay.
When I have
That's
100
fine.
hours to kill, sure. But
Yeah.
I've got a deadline that's tomorrow and I need to get it done.
Right. Like, figure out the tools that are available to you and utilize them to make your life easier, please.
Absolutely.
Like, there's not a point in the future where you're going to have this level of knowledge where you feel like, oh, I can start using extensions now. Like, you're never going to get there, ever.
Nope.
So, like, don't, like, yes, learn the software. Yes, learn how everything works. But, like, figure out the possibilities that are out there and use them, because why wouldn't you? It doesn't make any sense. But I get that a lot.
Tony
I don't know
says
why.
he didn't know that was a thing.
It's a thing. So I got it at Basecamp when I presented on extensions from a few people. Well, I just feel like I need to learn the program more. No, you don't.
So with that, what do you? I mean, in conjunction with what I had stated earlier about how extension really makes SketchUp. So what do you feel about SketchUp Web, the app? That's where I feel like the main core is missing. Sorry, is this sort of too much of a leading question?
Well, it's not a leading question. I think it's an interesting discussion, but I think there is a place for a SketchUp web app like SketchUp Web. I think that especially in the education space, I think in the school space and areas like that, making an accessible 3D modeler is great. I think it's, there's a great use for that. But like, there is so much that is added to SketchUp by having the ability to use extensions. There's so much that's added by functions that are in the desktop version that I feel like if you're going to use it seriously, and honestly, if we're being honest, like from a license term standpoint, if you're doing anything where you're making money, you should be using the desktop version anyway.
Yep.
But, and I think a lot of people weren't, and I think that may have led to at least partially the creation of the web-based version. I don't know that. I have no knowledge of that, but it would make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You should be using the desktop version, the paid version, if you're using it for commercial work. But like, there's just so much more you can do with it than the web version.
Yeah.
But again, I think just like we said before, there's a place for the web tool, but it's definitely limited in the way that it is right now.
I almost treat it solely for education and also viewing purpose only. Like, it's a good way to view whenever you have. I also found out that you can use a web version to backsave the models that you don't have a SketchUp new version for. So that's a way to do it.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's a thing. Or like to just quickly measure, and you can share a model that way and create a link so that other people could see. So that's one way to do it. I think it connects to Trimble Connect, so it makes sharing a bit easier. And if you ever decide to do like a VR AR on top, that's how it connects to the Trimble Connect. Anything you guys want to add to in the topic of SketchUp extension?
I mean, you mentioned the SketchUp Make versus SketchUp Desktop, and my only gripe at this point with SketchUp is I think there's such an over reliance on plugins from the company to support the software, and free plugins. You know,
But also from developer
that
point of view,
bothers me a little bit.
you can't because I also talk to SketchUp people, and I
You can't
also
develop all these in house. There's no way.
no, but also what I mean is I also don't want SketchUp to take over a couple of free extensions as their native tool. Like I wouldn't want Fredo 6's joint push pull tool to be native. Like I wouldn't like that, or it I don't think it's good for the community. If you
I
would.
mean, no, I don't think it would be good if it's an active tool, but also you have to think about the fact that these developers are developing these tools, and there's a lot of legacy involved in maintaining that tool. And is it fair to rely on some of these freeware developers to generate very functional, very useful tools for your product, without any way to support that long term? So let's say Fredo stops supporting all of his plugins. Well, what happens when he stops doing that and stops updating everything? I mean, Fredo is not going to live for Fredo Tools, the creator. I don't know his actual name, so bear with me here. But his tools are really valuable. And, we have the hit by a bus rule in our studio. Anything you do in the studio has to be saved, backed up in a functional way so that if I'm hit by a bus, you can take over. There's no way to prevent some of these tools to become completely deprecated and no longer functional inside of SketchUp. And I'm sure there will be some other artist or developer who will come on board and fill that gap. But, is it fair to rely on them for a paid piece of software? I could get it in Blender. That I get.
For tools like TomToms, you can basically make it into native tool without much problem, since he's working for SketchUp anyways. But for Fredo 6, it's kind of like, yeah.
So I have kind of a different perspective on this, because I think we're reaching a point with SketchUp where they're going to have to make a decision on what path they're going to go down and what they want to be. And I think you guys have probably talked, I think you might've talked about this with Matt, if I remember right, a little bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, I feel like what SketchUp has always wanted to do is stay in the simple 3D modeling, easy to use 3D modeling lane. Right. And so that's kind of the reason that they've given for not, adding a bunch of extensions and functions and stuff like that. And I think that's worked really well for them. But for the software to continue to grow and evolve, I'm not necessarily sure that going to a web-based version with some reduced features is taking it where it needs to be, because I'd like to see it continue being kind of competitive. But in order for them to do that, and in order for them to move forward, they would have to pick that direction, right? They would have to decide, okay, we're going to add advanced modeling tools. We're going to add architectural tools. We're going to add these different things. Well, all of a sudden you're not on your middle of the road anymore. You've taken a turn.
Yeah.
So what I would like to see, I'm a little surprised that we haven't seen this yet, is I don't think it's fair to say, well, SketchUp isn't really expanding the base functionality of SketchUp the way that they should be. I think they should go down the direction of starting to create those tools as extensions and as plugins. So SketchUp would then be creating, the architectural tool pack or the organic modeling tool pack. Not saying that they copy what's already out there, but what that would allow them to do is that would allow them to keep that simplicity, right? And who they are, but then it would also allow them to build out additional functions and features on top of it.
I thought they were going to start doing that for a long time, but because that's kind of how
Sandbox Tool,
Solar North and Sandbox Tools and a few of the others, and that seemed the way that they were going, but it just never really
it hasn't really to make a move or what, but I think right now they're in a good place because there's really nothing equivalent to SketchUp in the offerings.
No.
Like from a cost standpoint and everything else, there's people try to say, oh, I'm going to jump to Blender. No, you're not. Like if you're going to jump to Blender,
producing drawings.
Yeah, like if you've tried to use Blender for architectural modeling, it's not going to work out for you right now. Maybe later, but not right now.
Yeah.
So right now it's the best tool, and I would like to see them continue iterating so that someone else doesn't come out with a tool that's also easy to use that competes with it. Like now, while they've got the corner on that market.
Yeah, and I think there were a couple opportunities where like Autodesk produced a tool that was trying to be SketchUp, but it never really worked. Yeah, that Format tool, and then there was one that was somewhere in between SketchUp and Rhino that I can't remember the name of. It'll come to me. Bonsai 3D.
Interesting. Okay.
I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that. If anybody has, it was a great product. It was a great little tool. But it just never really picked up. It was like the best of Rhino and NURBS modeling mixed with the best of SketchUp simplicity and architectural modeling. It was a beautiful little tool. But it just never really got the traction it needed and never really grew. But yeah, I mean, you guys make some really good points about the direction of SketchUp and, Justin, to your point, staying in its lane while still trying to expand its reach is important. So it's been an interesting ride. I've been using SketchUp probably since 2005, right before Atlas got bought by Google, or SketchUp got bought by Google. So yeah, it's been an interesting ride to see it evolve over that many years.
Yeah, I also think because some people are really mad about it, right? Like they're very emotional about, well, the software should be here, it should be here, and I don't necessarily think that that's fair either. Like to start with a program and be like, oh, I like what it does, and then get super mad that like it hasn't been developed into something else is kind of a weird stance to take for me. Like to me, that's the point where you go, okay, well, maybe my needs have changed. And if this software doesn't provide that, maybe another software will, and maybe you use both of them. So I also don't think it's fair to be mad at SketchUp and the development group and all of that.
SketchUp's a business. It's
right.
I mean, we use the tool, we pay for the tool, but the reality of it is their bottom line is the important part, and they'll keep producing a tool as long as people keep using it. So clearly they're doing something right, because it's been almost 20 years.
Yeah. And I mean, it's, most architectural firms are maintaining SketchUp licenses. So it's not, and we're talking big architectural firms, small architectural firms, like professional groups are using SketchUp. So it's clearly a good tool, but could it be improved? Sure. But everything could be.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are actually 15-minute over time, and I really appreciate, and I would continue along, but I understand Ted's night is a lot later than mine and yours, of Justin's. So I'm a little mindful, and also, we have to end somewhere. So, I guess we'll close it here. I really appreciate everyone's time, everyone watching, and perhaps people who's going to be watching on record. And we do this every Tuesday, and so far we've been doing it every week. Who knows what happens.
Yeah, we've been pretty consistent.
Right. Nobody got hit by a bus yet. So so we've been somewhat consistent. Hopefully, Justin, we would love to have you on board again.
I'm in. Just tell me the time.
Yeah, I'll reach in. Apparently, we all need to get approval from wives, so that's something that we have to do beforehand. But I'll make sure you reach out. whether it be just SketchUp extensions, just AEC, YouTube in general, or just life about, how to get approval from wife, kind of thing. So I would love to chat again, and we would love to just catch you in different topics, different things, and it's absolute pleasure to have you on this show, and it's just us having a good time, and and also perhaps some people listening in as well. So I'll roll the outro. Any final say on anything, Justin?
Extensions, use them.
Extensions, use them. That's the comment of the night.
That's right.
All right, everybody. Thanks again, Joseph. Justin, thanks for being here.
Yeah,
and thanks
really
everybody
enjoyed it.
for watching.
Thank you. Bye-bye. See you next week.
Night, guys.
That is it. Thank you